This is Humans of Tech, episode 003, with me, Chris Morrow. Joining me today is a gentleman called Chris Gawne, who's the founder of Eurikah. Chris, thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, Chris.
So let's start the way that I would always like to start, which is right back at the beginning. So for everyone listening, can you give us a bit of background as to the beginning of your story?
Sure. So born in Carlisle, which is a large town in Cumbria, but large is relative. Relatively premature. So I don't know what they call these things, but essentially it looked like a see-through washing machine. So I was in one of those for a while. I think it was an incubator.
Yeah.
And then I don't know much about this at the very beginning, but essentially put up for adoption immediately. So I know my mum was 16, don't know anything about my dad. But very fortunate that got adopted whilst I was still in hospital, brought home and was raised in Barrow-in-Furness in Cumbria. So a smaller town, moving slightly south, but still very much north. And I was raised there until I was 18. And for people that don't know much about Barrow-in-Furness, my cousin mentioned to me, I think it was my granddad's funeral, he said, you either build nuclear submarines or you leave. and I chose the latter. So I had a bit of experience in the shipyard when I was younger, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so took a very generic, I'm doing the very short version here, took a generic business course at Manchester and have stayed here ever since. Did a lot of work in project management and program management for about a decade. And then, as you mentioned at the beginning, moved on to starting a business called Eurikah.
Awesome. So let's go back. Let's go back to the start there then, because you whizzed through that as if it was just sort of like absolutely nothing. So your mum was 16. You don't know anything about your dad, and you were adopted whilst you were literally still in hospital. That's like, what was it? What was that like growing up? And when did you know about that story?
The short answer is it was very easy, I guess. So my parents have been very open since the very beginning. So that all I remember is being told I was adopted, but I didn't really guess. I guess I didn't really know what that meant very early on. But I've got my parents have got a tin somewhere back home. I think it's in a cupboard above the bed. And I don't know if they still do this, but basically, while I was being looked after in hospital, the nurses would write letters as if it was me writing them while I was in there, saying, "Today, I've done this and I've done that, and this is how I'm getting on," and whatever it may be. It's just kind of like a little diary, and there's a little tin at home with all that in. But my parents were always very honest and open. I think the first memories I've got around this is not like the way the TV shows it, someone being told on the 12 or 13.
Big announcement, and they have this massive breakdown. Yeah. I'm watching a programme at the moment. I don't know if you've ever seen it, called This Is Us.
Heard about it, not seen it.
Yeah, and there's a one of the characters in there is adopted. Funnily enough, whilst he's in hospital, his mum and dad are due to have triplets, and one of the babies died, and someone left this baby at a fire station, and they took the baby home, and all. It's a crazy story. But that's all around this child trying to find out who they are, and sort of, that journey to like getting to the truth and stuff. But did you ever feel it going down that road with regards to that?
Not hugely, to be honest. No, I think part of the fact that it was so open from the beginning, so it was very normal. As I say, it wasn't like the TV shows where you have this kind of crisis of confidence and identity. That was never the case. And I think my parents were always very, and still to this day, have always been very kind of, there's no pressure or expectation to do anything. The questions I always got was never go down this route or think about doing this or work hard on. It was just, do you enjoy this? Does it make you happy? If yes, do more of it. If not, do less. And so I've got a sister as well, and she's the same. We're not blood related. She was adopted as well. I've not spoke to her about it, to be honest. So I don't know how much she'll want me to say on here, but I think she's more interested in looking into her past. And I guess as we go through this conversation, one of the things we'll see is that I'm not someone that's looking back a lot. I'll take lessons, I'll learn from it. I'll take the lesson and I'll move forward. And I don't tend to dwell too much in the past. So it's a weird one, really. Oh, it's not a weird one. It's very normal for me, but there's no feelings of any kind. There's no resentment. There's no kind of, not afraid, not kind of yearning to find out more. More a case of, that's what happened. It's what I've learned from it. This is what I've gained from it. Can't really change that fact. And more bothered about, what I want to do in the future and where I can take myself and what journey that is, as opposed to looking back and trying to unpiece that. And I don't think, as I say, there's no strong feelings, positive or negative, towards that, to be honest. And I don't feel like, and I was just thinking, normally when my friends find this out for the first time, they seem to have a much bigger reaction than I've had from it. So there's no kind of, I don't feel like I've missed out on anything in any way from that kind of. But if anything, it was probably, if you look at it, having a potentially 16-year-old mother and potentially no father, and then having a very happy upbringing. I think I got very lucky, to be honest.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I totally get that. So, yeah, fair play to you. It's a great. I understand what you mean, because some people they're expecting this reaction, and this. I suppose you see TV shows of people like searching for their past and their long lost family, and everyone being reunited, and people just think that's maybe like that's what every child who's adopted must feel and must think, but obviously not. So you mentioned there you've got a sister who's also adopted. But was there any other children in the family, like your mum and dad? Did they have any biological children of their own at all?
No. I think is why they went down the route they went down with myself and my sister. So it's just the two of us. And my parents probably quite happy now, because we both left home and we're off elsewhere, so they've got a bit more time to themselves. But no, just the two of us.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your mum and dad then. So like what's their backgrounds, and what do they do?
Sure. So both now retired. My dad, that point we made earlier around you either build nuclear submarines or you leave, my dad chose the former.
Yeah.
So if he had a CV, it would have one line on it. It would say it's had numerous names over the times. It's BAE Systems these days. Yeah. But it was Vickers, VSEL, etc. Yeah. So he went in after grammar school, I think it was back in the day, stayed and retired. And my mum did a number of things early on in time. She worked in various places. She was in Boots for a while, working behind the counters there. And then later on, funded and retrained as a social worker. So spent a bit of time whilst I was a teenager, and then going off to uni, working in social care.
Awesome. And in terms of your where you grew up, obviously you touched on it there. So funny you should say Barrow, because one of my old flatmates comes from Barrow and Furness, so I'm well averse to what it's all about and where it is, and everything like that. So that's, I mean, because it's a small place, isn't it? Really, I mean, like, kind of like the community, and it's very much, I don't know, majority kind of working class place. Would you say?
Very much so. Yeah, very much. It gets a lot of stick, and to be fair, call me a hypocrite, because I don't really go back very often these days. It's very, very rare that I'll go back. I prefer city living than I do kind of country living. And Barrow is a relatively small town. But having said all that, growing up, it was brilliant. So you didn't have the kind of, it wasn't like you were living in a big city as a kid and having to try and navigate your way around and try and work out all the much more varied social, political, economic kind of variables you'll get in a big city living. It was small. It had its own little areas of, I don't know, maybe slightly more affluent, slightly less affluent, but the inequality was kind of less. And at that age, you don't really notice it anyway. Yeah. There was plenty of sports and fields, and school was 5 minutes away. So in terms of growing up, it was, it was great. I loved it. I think it was, the cricket. I played a lot of cricket when I was younger, and literally at the end of our road was the hospital, and in the grounds of the hospital was Barrow Cricket Club. Still is there to this day. So that was easy to get to. The football was literally the other end of of our street. Yeah. So the football fields and everything like that. So it gets a lot of I think it gets a lot of stick. It's never really in the news for good reasons. I think Legionnaire's disease was the last time
Yeah.
Barrow got in the news, and then it was, I think, the highest COVID rate at the beginning of the pandemic. So we don't get a lot of good press. I think it's known as the longest cul-de-sac in the country because it's kind of, you get around there and just where do you go from there. But as I say, growing up, I'd have much rather grown up there than as I say, other way around, growing up in Manchester or London, then moving to there and somewhere like that in the future.
No, I get that. Yeah. So, what was your sort of early childhood like? Was it mainly quite a happy time? Good family environment.
Yeah, very much so. Very kind of, I guess, very uneventful in a way. I think that, as I say, the bits that probably look back and take away from it is, as I say, there was no pressure to be or to do anything. It was a case of try things. If you like them, do it more often. If you don't like it, work out why, do it less often, or not even work out why, do it less often, and kind of stick within the wide path of what is acceptable, what you should be doing. So work hard at school, keep going as long as you can. And I think the expectation in somewhere like Barrow, and I think this becomes more apparent later on in the story, is there's no kind of, and I don't think it's just Barrow in this, but most of the countries, there was just no kind of financial education where we were at. So the path that everyone took was, you go to school, you go to sixth form. If you're lucky, you might go to university. If you're not, you not drop out, you get a trade, you get a job. You go in the yard, as it's known. Mm-hmm. And you work hard, and then you retire. And there was nothing really else. There was Sheffield Wednesday, I think, had some training, and so one or two kids got to go and play football for a bit. But the way we all went through it was just a case of, is get your head down, study, find out what you're good at, do that as a job. Or just find out what you can get a job and just work. And that was kind of...
Yeah, because you were born, what, 87, was it?
87.
Yeah, because back then, because I'm not too far, I'm a few years older than you, but not too many, only 5. So but school, British schools are around that time. In fact, I think until very recently, I might be wrong, if at all, pretty much no financial education in terms of teaching children about real basics like money and savings and what a mortgage is and all the rest of it. And I think it's probably, one of the most, if not the most important things to be teaching children. I don't think my dad would thank me for saying this, but he never taught me anything really, at home with it. Like, it wasn't like he's not like a sit down chat type of guy where he'd sort of like talk to you about things. He would let you figure it out by yourself. And stuff.
My dad was the opposite in that, to be honest. So I learned the value of money from him.
Right.
I still think that, and as I say, second, third, fourth hand information, but from what I can see around me, the standard of financial education, just in general, whether it's at school or beyond, is still really substandard, and that's something that we're trying in our own way to put right with Eurikah. But from understanding the value of money, I got that very early on. Barrow isn't the most affluent place in the world. It's not like we're all struggling, but we didn't want for anything. But at the same time, it wasn't like we were. I don't think we went on a holiday abroad until I was 12, 13.
Yeah.
So we didn't struggle, but it wasn't the other end. So I guess where I'm going with that is, my dad was very good at making me understand the value of money. So back when you could get up at 5 o'clock in the morning as a 13-year-old, I was on the back of a milk float running around delivering milk. At 14, it was paper rounds and stuff. So there was always... I was
strong work ethic, basically, behind everything.
Yeah, not out of choice, because I'd procrastinate if I could. But I think it was more a case of go and do this, go and do it with your mates. So like we had loads of fun doing the milk round. There was 2 or 3 of us that were just hopping on, small hands, gloves on, 3 pints in and running off and doing. So it was, but what it did teach me, as I say, is I could see from an early age, people with more money could do more things, but I didn't understand how it worked at all. But what I did understand, that I could go and do things to get money, to save that, and then have the opportunity to do more things with it. And that is kind of, I think that's where the kind of seed came from, where I'm at today still, is looking around and seeing that, not a case of, not that fascination with the material side of money, but just the freedom and the options that having money gave to people that had it. And that's as I said, that's run very strongly throughout my life. Is when I was working, it was always about have pride in what you're doing, do it really well, do as good a job as you can, but also find a way to become as financially dependent as early as possible. Because if you still want to work, great. But if you want to go and do something else, even if it's just as a temporary measure, then that's kind of, I want that freedom.
Yeah.
I've always wanted that freedom.
Yeah, no, awesome. So let's continue building some of the context behind all of this then. So you mentioned there about sport, cricket. Cricket is cricket your main sport growing up, would you say? Or
Yeah, growing up it was definitely. This is the only time I'll do any sort of bragging, I think, tonight. But the worst pub quiz in the world answer. So I was the first under 11 Cumbria County captain.
Right.
So yes, that's a little bit of pride for me there, I think. So it was cricket for me. My dad was still is cricket for him. He got me into the football as well, but I'm sure we'll come on to that later. But it was cricket first. So and being left-handed was always a bit of an unfair advantage to start with anyway.
Yeah.
So, but I was playing that, training twice a week, matches twice a week, and that was a big part of the social side of things for me, I think, growing up, as I say, with the cricket being so close as well.
Where would you sit in the order then if you were?
It depends what age group we were playing. So, like, if I was playing in my own age group,
this is me trying to think like I know what I'm talking about here as a Glaswegian, like talking about cricket. No Glaswegians worth their salt know anything about cricket. I the only reason I know kind of what I'm talking about a little bit is that some of my friends were cricketers when I was at uni, so I was going and watching them and pick little stuff up, but
drinking and watching,
basically drinking Guinness and watching some of it.
Yeah, I think so. It depends what age group we're playing at, because I was playing open age quite early as well, and so Barrow was quite good at promoting the youngsters. So when we were 13, 14, 15, we were playing open age adult cricket. But at my own age group, I was a bit greedy. I'd open the bowling and the batting. I think if it was open age, I was more of a bowler than a batsman.
Yeah.
But it's one of very, very few regrets is I keep looking at cricket clubs in Manchester, and I never get around to doing it. And I guess COVID's made it even worse. And being 34 on Friday, which is depressing to say out loud. I think I know Jimmy Anderson can do it, but there's not too many people at my age doing it. But I keep looking. I just never take the plunge.
Yeah. Well, you should definitely do that, because, at some point, we're not getting any younger, Chris. It's like,
tell me,
it's one of those where you just like all of a sudden it's gone in a flash and you can't do it anymore.
Well, you can't lose what you never had either. So
yeah, I'm the same with football. To be honest, it's something I inadvertently gave up playing football. When my first daughter arrived, when we lived in Sydney, and I wouldn't say I regretted it, because it was the circumstances at the time. I had to move house and downsize to save money and all of that, pretty sharpish. And but I just thought that, like, naively, that 6 months later I would go back to playing football. But obviously life takes over and you end up not doing it, and here we are, like, nearly 6 years later, and I haven't kicked a ball since. And you think, I played it like every week since I was 7. So but I'm
going to give you your advice back to you, I think, and go and take the plunge.
I know, yeah. Well, twins at the moment, 18-month-old twins at the moment, mate. So I'm not anywhere
okay,
not anywhere close to having free time enough, or getting a holiday form signed off by the missus on that one. So
now you're making me feel bad because I've got no excuse.
Okay, so sport was obviously a big factor in terms of, like, you growing up in the surrounding area and stuff. But what else was it like growing up where you were in terms of, like, school, like early years at school? I'm guessing it was like a fairly tight knit community, being round about in Barrow.
Yeah, I mean, there was a number of schools. So, I mean, primary school was what you expect from primary school. Is before kids start turning into what we all know they can be at the best and the worst of times, kind of thing. So primary school was very much just sport, school, run around. And, it was very, very uneventful, very, very, just nice. I think once you get to secondary school and you start becoming a a teenager, then the kind of the hierarchies come in, don't they?
Yeah.
The egos start to turn up. But even then, I mean, I think you and I were probably very lucky in that as I was leaving secondary school, mobile phones were just coming out. And as I was going through university, Facebook was just coming out.
Yeah.
And I just as a side point, I think I would hate to grow up today where if someone had a problem with you or you had a problem with them, it was between 9 and 3 Monday to Friday, because you'd all then disperse and you couldn't reach each other. And if you weren't friends, you weren't going to knock on and do anything with those people anyway. But these days, it must be a lot harder. So when you look at the comparison between like the social media days today and what we had, it was you had your Mickey taking and I don't know, bullying or whatever you want to call it. It was never serious, but you had all that kind of thing at school. But it was still there was nothing that serious. People tended to sort things out either very quickly. They'd have a bit of a scrap and then you'd move on, kind of thing. And so it was very much the same. Yeah, as I say, that's probably the benefit, as I say, of growing up in somewhere like Barrow, somewhere like Manchester, where it's a lot more diverse in every sense. So there was never kind of huge incidents there. It was more, as I say, it was more just the fact, the lack of that bubble. So that everything that's positive about that bubble growing up is also the negative side of things, because you don't get the exposure to all the potential things you could do. So that, if I'd have not chosen to leave and I had gone in the yard, then you're probably still going to be there in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, until you retire. And then for me personally, I know a lot of people, like my dad, loves that routine and that was great for him. But for someone like myself, it was a case of going, there's got to be more than this cul-de-sac. And so so it was a very easy decision to kind of. I think my mum likes to remind me that normally people are waving people off at university crying away, and I was like, right, see you later, thanks very much, let's go. Next kind of thing. I was looking forward to it, to see what came next.
Of course, yeah. So in school, in general, then school for you, was that? Did you enjoy it? Was it a good experience for you?
Generally, yes. Yeah. I mean, I was a bit of I probably still am. I'm not as bad as I used to be, but I was. I've always been a bit of an idiot, I guess is the best way to describe it. I like to talk. I like to talk back at people. I like to question. I still like to question things to this day. But when I was growing up at school, I think it was a bit of a rebellious stage. So, if a teacher said something, I'd try and catch them out. I had back in the day, those earphones that kind of go around your ear, and I had that kind of tucked in my shirt with my mini disc player in my pocket. Teacher walks in, Chris, get that out of your ear. I said, it's a hearing aid, sir. And he goes, take it out. I said, no, sir, it's a hearing aid. I can't hear without it. I'm not going to tell you again. Flicked out my ear. And he said, see, that's better, isn't it? I went, pardon? He went, I'm so sorry. So just that kind of
just cheek, basically.
Just being an arse, really. Yeah, just, there was no kind of, just trying to kind of question everything. And I have that still to this day. And I think it served me very well. But I've got it in a more controlled way that isn't being antagonistic. So I was always wasn't the brightest kid in the world, but I've never kind of been. I was always kind of top set, if they still do it in that way, but kind of coasting through it. So a couple of teachers used to say things like, if Chris will finish his work first, and then he'll distract everybody else, and then the kids that are not quite as quick then start to fall behind more. So he needs to stop doing it. And I was just like, no. So, but on the whole, no, there was no kind of. It was as I say, you have a group of friends, you get on with those people, you have the people you don't get on as well with, and I guess it's just regular school stuff. But I think if you went back to ask some of the teachers, that there'd probably be a few looks in a few directions if my name was mentioned. Not notoriously, but just because I was a pain.
So what was it? Is that the general theme of the school reports that we would see if we managed to dig up? That would be quite a good segment for the podcast. Let's read out school reports.
There was one. There was one I remember that started. Chris loves to talk.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Chris has done well this year or he's not done well this year. It was just Chris loves to talk, and I even remember like going through GCSEs and A levels and teachers and form tutors sitting me down and going, this is the most important 2 weeks of your life. You've got to concentrate in these next few months. And I just remember thinking, no, it's nonsense. Like, if this is the most important 2 weeks of my life, what am I doing wrong on many ways, not just because of the academic side of things, but if you're telling me that whether it's 16 or 17, 18 years old, that's the peak, I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. So
everything's all, I think at that age when you're going through those things, everything's is the biggest thing in your life. Like so you're told, you get your GCSEs are like the biggest thing in your life, and it's like everyone's freaking out about them, and then as soon as they're over, you've forgotten about it, never talked about it again, and you move on. Then it's A-levels. A-levels are the biggest thing in your life, and then it's it's like you need to get into university, and then you get into university, and then no one talks about A-levels ever. Again,
and then you get your degree, and no one talks about your degree.
Exactly.
Either.
So everything's always like the biggest thing in your life, and I think it's yes, a lot of it's hype at that age, but I think if you can see through it, like you obviously did.
And it wasn't even difficult to kind of see through, to be honest. I mean, even with all that bubble, that bubble you're in Barrow, you can still look around and with not too much critical analysis, look around and go, hold on, that person over there is at the top of their game.
Yeah.
And they didn't even go to any form, sixth form or university, but they've got experience and learned from experience and done it that way. And it just wasn't very difficult I didn't think anyway. Maybe I'm just naive and ignorant, but it was quite an easy one to look around and go, hold on, this doesn't logically make any sense to me. So please stop telling it to me, because it's depressing. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So at what age did you sort of like think you wanted to maybe go exploring, leave the bustling metropolis of Barrow and Furness and look elsewhere? Did that happen like sort of like 16 or so, or was it younger than that? Or
I don't think I ever really had a defined path. I've never really. It's very difficult, isn't it? Because once you'll know this. Once you start trodding whatever path that is you're going down, you realise very quickly that if you try and plan too far, I want to do this by 20, this by 25, and be in this position by 30. It doesn't work that way. And I think I'd seen that quite early on as well. So I knew kind of maybe 12, 13, 14-ish that, I wasn't going to be staying in Barrow forever, just because I couldn't really see what that looked like, and it didn't really appeal to me. And the main reason was because, as I go back to the parents saying, go and find the stuff that you want to do that makes you happy. There's no point you getting the best paying job in the world but being miserable every day. Yeah. And I think that was a really freeing way to approach bringing up a child. And I think it's the best way, because I know other friends that still live in Barrow to this day whose parents were far more pushy. Make sure you got good grades, look at these jobs, do work experience here, go down this route, and they're kind of being dragged by the scruff of it, going down, but I just want to play football or whatever it was for a bit. And so I think actually that way of doing things is just going, there are no boundaries, you go and find what you want to do. Probably gives the average person more chance of finding something that's going to have that combination, either of, if you're driven by the material side of things, you'll find something that gives you that. If you're just driven by having a life where you jump out of bed each morning as opposed to pull the duvet over your head and kind of wish the day away, I think that helps as well. So I think I kind of knew very early on, but I didn't know what, where, why, how. And it's only been, as I say, it's only really been with the Eurikah side of things that I kind of feel that sense of this is something that I actively skip around and out of bed each morning to come and do this, because this is something I'm very passionate about. Previously to that, it was more around, as I say, it was more being driven by becoming financially independent as early as possible and just pride of doing a good job. Now I've got something that's kind of, I've been having some conversations around funding and VCs, etc., and they all want to know your exit strategy. And I say, I'll be doing this until I physically, mentally can't do it anymore, because I enjoy it. And it's been a really weird kind of shift from that direction. I appreciate I've gone off a massive tangent.
No. Question no, it all makes sense. Yeah, all makes sense. I mean, it's what you just mentioned there about parents and your parents' approach to that. That's actually, I think, a very smart move by your parents, by any parents, to give that free and capability to their children, because
I'll send them this clip.
Because and I've thought a lot about this, because obviously I'm a parent now, and I think back to the way that my dad sort of was so laid back with me. He was virtually horizontal at times, you know, in terms of like, you know, he never pushed me at anything, you know, in any particular path. But it was very much an attitude of just, you know, figure it out for yourself and see what you, like you just said, like see what you like and do what you like and don't do what you don't like. I mean, it sounds really basic advice, but I think one thing that inadvertently leads to from a parenting perspective is if you do push your child down the wrong path is resentment. You know, if you think about the amount of artists that are now lawyers or, you know, people who are, you know, who always wanted to be a doctor, but they actually work in the shipyard or whatever because their granddad was there and their dad was there or whatever. And you see some of the, or you hear some of these stories about kids who are pushed down to go into a particular university, doing a particular subject, basically just so that the mum or the dad or both could go and boast about the kid in their cricket club or their golf club or their tennis club or like whatever it is, or to their group of friends. And that I just think is the complete wrong move, because what happens with the child when they grow up, they resent the parent. Absolutely. They don't ultimately just magically become happy. They have this resentment towards being driven down a path that they wouldn't have otherwise chosen for themselves. And I think a lot of that's driven by trying to please the parent as well. So fair play to your mum and dad for giving you that and not pushing you in that direction.
I think even better as well. And so there's 2 points on this, I think, from what you just said there. The first one is that I was always made very aware that there was still a safety net there. So go and try things, and we're still here. So don't worry, because there's still a safety net. There's always going to be a roof over your head, kind of thing. You're never gonna go back to zero. Yeah. And so that was really strong. And that was a huge
that was like
piece.
A license to roam type thing there, because you.
Yeah, but on this end of the scale, it was a case of also if I was properly out of place, you know, there was still boundaries, and I'd still be told very bluntly, you know, that's not acceptable. So get back in line. You know, you've got a lot of road here before you hit the curbs. Yeah. You've got more than enough. So keep going down the road. Don't hit the curbs, and if you hit the curbs, you'll know about it, kind of thing. So it was the best of both. You almost had kind of, as I say, you had your guardrails up on either side, so you weren't, you know, you had the safety net if you needed it, and you had someone to just turn you around in a very blunt fashion if you were kind of facing the wrong direction. But the rest, it was just go and be happy. I think in retrospective, looking back at it now, and I agree with you completely. It's for me, it's giving your kids the best chance of what I would class as success, which is them feeling fulfilled. You don't. I know we might get into it later, and what I'm working on now makes this all sound like very much hypocrisy. But money isn't the be all and end all, which I think some people sometimes think it is. And you don't need a huge amount of it to be happy and content, in my opinion.
Absolutely, totally agree with that statement as well. So moving on from there, then we get to, let's say, late teenage years, and you obviously did you leave to go to university straight away, or did you do anything in between school and going to uni? Or
no, I
couldn't wait to get out of Barrow, basically. Just
after all the good things I said. I vaguely remember just not wanting to feel left behind, to feel like the next step for me was to go and get to university, go for that business course, because I still didn't know what I wanted to do. Yeah. But I knew that business was generic enough to give me options, but also perhaps naively and ignorantly, coming from Barrow, business would lead into something that would also give me the money to have the opportunity to have the financial freedom. Right. So I went straight from sixth form. So the way it worked in Barrow was you had different schools. We had one private school, Roman Catholic school, a couple of other schools, and they all then, apart from the private school, if I remember correctly, all then went, if you were going to sixth form, to Barrow sixth form, and then from there you would potentially go off to university. Right. So went through the sixth form, again, very uneventful, just getting a bit lazier, I think, from my point of view, which is not a good thing. So playing less sports, and then straight to university straight away. I got I got through. So I'm the first in my family to go to university, so I didn't know anything about it. And so I didn't realise there was red bricks and metropolitans. And I didn't know what the difference was either, because I didn't know there was a difference in the first place. So my mum brought home this Richard Branson's Virgin Big Book of Universities. And it was essentially just a kind of a proper doorstop size book. And it was reviews of all the universities in the UK by the students that were there, and we were ranking them all. And so, because I wanted to go to business school, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, I ended up getting into Northumbria Business School, and then realising at that point, going, I don't know why, but I don't want to go and live in Newcastle for 3 or 4 years. There was something about Manchester which was just far more alluring. And my dad had introduced me to City at the time. So we'd been to a couple of games as I was coming out of the cricket side of things. So 15, 16, the cricket side of things started to kind of go off slightly. I wasn't being picked anymore for the county side, and it's not a sore point whatsoever. I'm joking. But no, so my dad's decided at 16, I'll take you to City's game, and that was the first football match I'd been to.
Why City then? Because City at that time weren't like, it's not like City. It's
rubbish.
It's not like City are now. Do you know what I mean? That's a yeah. Where would they? What kind of state would the football club have been in at that time? Like league and stuff?
Just moved to the Etihad,
right?
But my first match was 2002, I think it was. It was a cup game versus Leicester, and Sunji High and Sibierski were playing for us at the time. I think Dickov was playing for Leicester before he came back to us. But it wasn't the football for obvious reasons that won me over. But coming from somewhere like Barrow, it was coming to this. And there'll be loads of jokes here, but coming into this stadium filled full of people and this kind of tribal atmosphere of everybody from all different backgrounds, all pulling for the same thing, and that kind of all that non-verbal communication that makes live sport so special. I was captivated by it. So my first ever wage. So when I went to university and got a third place was in industry. So my first ever wage was my first ever season ticket. I actually ended up having to buy individual tickets the season before, which was, I don't know if you remember, it was the Stuart Pearce Beanie Baby era. So I was paying top whack per game to watch City, who didn't score a home goal after Boxing Day that season. And since then, I've had a season ticket ever since then, and it's calmed down a bit now. I don't get as I used to get the highs and the lows of it. I've mellowed out a bit now, but I still there's nothing quite like a football game, and you can understand when you go why so many people are so captivated by it.
It's religion. That's what it is. Yeah. It's as close. I mean, if you think about what religion is, sport is religion. Football, especially in the UK, soccer for any of our US listeners.
Football for any of our US.
Yeah,
it's always football.
It's as close to a religious experience, I think, as you get if you weren't an avid, sort of place of worship goer, because it is tribal, and it is loud and exciting, and
there's a camaraderie, isn't there? Tribal's the best word to describe it.
Definitely tribal. It's you feel part of something, and that I think that
it's intoxicating.
Yeah, very intoxicating. Yeah, my first ever, because I'm a Celtic fan, as I mentioned to you just before, and my first ever game, I think I went to Celtic Park. This before it was like an all-seater stadium. This is when I was. Well, my dad actually said he took me as a baby. like and just
rite of passage,
like in his shirt type thing, no ear protection or anything like that. But he said, he used to lift us over the turnstiles, and used to basically never got to see the game because it was everyone was standing up and stuff, and I was always trying to get to see the match. But I was actually a mascot when I was 7, and I remember distinctly going out onto the pitch, and it was Celtic against Aberdeen. It was the first ever B-Sky B live televised Sky match in Scotland, and I think we got beat 3-1, so I wasn't invited back. But I remember going out into the middle of the pitch, and I remember the crackling in my ear, and I remember just looking around, and there was probably like 50,000 people there or whatever, and just thinking, wow, this is like unbelievable. I just remember the noise, just, you know, especially at a young age, it's just like nothing you've ever seen, you've ever experienced. It's amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
And it always sticks with you. So Manchester. So Manchester City's obviously got a big factor in your moving to Manchester. Then
it was weird. There was no kind of one overriding piece. It wasn't like my friends were then moving to Manchester, so I wanted to be where they were going, because I've never been led that. The peer pressure's never really played at all. I don't really care what other people say I think I do. As long as I can justify what I'm doing for the reason I think it's the right thing, and I've thought it through, then that's what I do, and it doesn't really matter whether you agree or not, as long as I'm comfortable with it. So it wasn't that reason. Part of it was the ability to go and watch City more often, but at that point, obviously, not a season ticket holder and not been to a huge number of games by then, because I was living 100 miles away. So it wasn't that. Some of the music I liked a bit more. It just seemed like, for me, Manchester as a city, coming from Barrow, that was where people went on a day. If they went shopping for the day, because that's what you do in Barrow, they would go to Manchester. If you wanted to go and see a show, Manchester's the closest city. So there was a little bit of connection from that way. But I couldn't put my finger on to this day what it was, but there was just something inherently inside me that said, you don't want to go there, go here. So I ended up going through clearing and getting into Manchester Met, which, as I say, at the time, didn't realise what the difference was between Manchester and Manchester Met. Probably, to be quite frank, didn't realise there was two different Manchester universities, because we didn't know. But it had a good score in this book, and I went for it. And it was outside of the studies. It was a fantastic 4 years. Obviously, I'm still here now. Yeah. The studies are part of it. Mm-hmm. Absolute waste of time.
Yeah. Why?
And I take some blame for that, but absolute waste.
Why was that?
I probably should take most of the blame. I think I was more interested in just finding out what it was like outside of Barrow and just learning from experience. I think I'm quite a believer of, you know, if you've got the right head on your shoulders and you're trying to do the right thing, then just go and do things and find out what works and doesn't, and understand yourself why. So there's always that kind of side of things. But also, I've got a part of it which was right at the very end when I got quite ill. And I needed to go through mitigating circumstances to get a piece of coursework done, because the way they weighted it back in the day, and I could be very wrong here, but to this day, when I sat down and broke all the different elements of my grades down, I worked out that I was essentially 3% off a first. And I'd gone in, and this is how little I knew about university. When I'd gone there, I remember being told, just anecdotally from friends, you don't want to get a first because employers will think you're a bookworm. So the best grade to get is a 2-1. Yeah, right. And in retrospect now, it's absolutely nonsense, isn't it? You can easily speak to someone and quite quickly find out whether they have got interpersonal skills or not. Yeah. But so I'd worked out I was 3% away. And one of these pieces of coursework that I'd failed when I was really ill and couldn't get in at all to university was one of the ones I just said I want to resubmit. And essentially I got sent around the houses, got missed messages, turning up into university to hand these courseworks in, and the doors were locked. And it was just on top of everything else, that left a real sour taste in my mouth, to be honest. But for the 3 or 4 years before that very end point, I'm probably 80-90% to blame, because I just wouldn't go all the time. I just wasn't. There was nothing of interest in the lessons. There's nothing I could see myself using. So I very quickly became quite disillusioned with it, to be honest.
It's a very different experience, like learning experience, when you compare it to school. It's what I always found in that it was. I mean, going from, like, for instance, the size of the classroom into like 500 people lectures, and just being given a list of books to go away and read. So I had a similar experience at university where I was like, yeah, it wasn't all it was kind of cracked up to what it certainly wasn't what it was sold to me as when
100%.
You were going through all the heartache of, like, studying for your A levels and your GCSEs and all the rest,
and going to the open days and having the campus and whatnot. So
the big sell, and then you get there and it's like, it can be rough, if you're not, you're not sort of enjoying it. So was that for the whole time that you were there? You just sort of literally just thought, couldn't
Yeah,
wait to.
yeah. I think I saw quite a few of the people I got quite close with early on. They dropped out within the first year, and not that I was in any way an influence. In fact, I was still at that point. I was still the first one to answer back. I was still the first one to be a pain in the ass, and I was still, probably needed, probably dragging into line and being. And obviously when you're away from home and you're in the city for the first time, there's so many distractions that that was far more entertaining and enjoyable for me. And I mean, I've been told this, and it's not something I necessarily thought about much, but it wasn't too challenging, and that's again not an arrogant side of things, but the context. There was like a globalization and sustainability course, which I couldn't tell you a single thing from that particular part of the course, except that the tutor of that piece, as with all the other tutors, wrote the book that you then had to buy to do the course, and you had to go to the university and buy this £40 book each time you went to a different course, and the author was the person sat in front of you, and that's the only thing I can remember from any of this. But as I say, it's not all down to them. I think hopefully it's improved, because there was nothing particularly not particularly memorable, so that's not a good side of things from their side. But I, at the same time, acknowledge that I wasn't the kind of model student that they would have probably hoped to have had either.
So, and what about work experience? So, like, whilst you were at university, did you get lined up? Because some courses obviously line you up with work experience. Sometimes you have to find it yourself, and sometimes it's like a course-led thing. Did you have anything like that in your course?
So I'd done a couple of, as I said, I'd worked from quite an early age back in Barrow at school, and then I'd done a couple of work experiences in the yard, because really there's nowhere else to go. So I'd kind of climbed around the propellers and parts of the hulls of a nuclear submarine, and been in that kind of environment, and realised I'm better with my head than my hands. So manual jobs are just not my forte. But in the third year of university, you had to go and find it yourself, and I was quite lucky in the end, because I remember the psychometric tests. And I did, and for some reason, a couple of comments I've had back before is I do really well, or did do. I've not done them for a long time. Did do really well in those kind of puzzle figuring and number recollections and those kind of things. So I did my third year at General Electric, which people know is a huge American-based company. They span lots of different arms, and that's kind of where I got my first taste of project management. So I got to see what really appealed to me when I saw that. So I was working in service delivery, so IT focused, but still delivery led. And what I liked about it at that time was you could have a meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. And before lunch, what you started doing has completely changed. In the afternoon, it's different again. So I found quite early on as well that I'm really, really bad with repetition. I hate it. It's just so, I'm not adding any value. Other people can do this better than me, or you can automate it and do it far better than I can do it. So I hate repetition. It's just extraordinarily demotivating. And the thing that appealed to me about project management at that time was that it looked to me like that you're problem solving. You had to be kind of analytical, and that was kind of playing towards where I was kind of developing. And then things were different all the time, and that was really, really quite appealing. So I ended up in General Electric in the third year. And it was at that point that I got really ill. And so from memory, the discussions I was having at the time was to come back after university and go on the leadership program. And I think one or two people I was with ended up doing that.
Right.
But it was what will it have been? It had been with the winter of that third year. Just out of nowhere, I went into work in the morning, all normal, and then just remember, like, from nowhere, feeling fine, and then just I feel really ill. This just really weird, and like just get out away from your desk, because you're gonna chuck up kind of thing. And it may have just been norovirus. I'm not sure, but essentially I had a week off or so, back to normal. Came back in, and then 2 weeks later, it all came back. But this time it was how can I best describe it? Constantly feeling like you're about to throw up. Unable to sleep, because no matter where you try and position yourself at all, it feels worse. And then can't eat at all, because even the thought of food, you feel like you've overeaten to the point where you want to be ill. And then obviously, because of all that, then the knock-on effect is that that you've just got no energy at any point in time whatsoever. So I went around a lot of specialists, a lot of tests, a lot of machines, a lot of needles.
Right.
I remember one point, I think this was back in Barrow before I went to see a specialist in Salford, not because I was here, but because the doctor there was meant to be one of the best in the country at the time. But I remember walking into Furness General Hospital, sitting down, and what am I at this point? 19? And the doctor sat there, no bedside manner whatsoever, just sits down and goes, right, so we don't think it's cancer. And I was like, don't think. let's find out for sure. But that went on for 3 years, and I was down at 9.5 stone at one point, and they just couldn't work out what it was. And in the end, they gave me a kind of a assumed diagnosis of something called either post-viral dysmobility or post-viral dysmotility syndrome.
Right.
And the way it was explained to me was essentially, if you think of a cut, you cut yourself, you bleed, it heals, generally speaking, goes back to normal. What they said with this is, if it was what they thought it was, if you've got a virus, what that virus can do sometimes is get into your nervous system. And if it gets into your nervous system and attacks the nerves, A, they take a lot longer to recover, and B, they may not always fully recover.
Right.
And so it's even still to this day, I have almost kind of daily symptoms, but it's much less than it was. I had one quite bad spell a year or so ago for about a year, 18 months, where it was very similar again. And I went back and did all the same tests, drank the barium fluids, got x-rayed everywhere, took all the tests, etc. Had cameras and biopsies and all that kind of stuff. And everything keeps coming back normal, which is both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
But so that was that kind of scuppered the GE side of things. And then, as I say, came back into the final year of university. And then, for most of that, it was no longer a case of not turning up because of a lack of motivation and ill discipline on my own part. It was a physically unable to, mentally unable to concentrate, physically unable to get out of bed and get to university. So, but no, the short answer to the question is yes. I went to General Electric and worked there, got extended a few times. It looked like it was going to be really good, but probably in hindsight, was probably one of the best things that could have happened to me from a career point of view, because then when I ended up getting my first job, so I ended up finishing university. 2-1 I got in the end because of all the nonsense with the mitigating circumstances stuff, which is really annoying. And I'm just looking down here because I do somewhere have a load of old pay slips, and I have a wedge of papers about that thick where I printed all the correspondence off with MMU around this, because I was ready to go and say, this is what you said, and this is when you said it, and this is what I'd anyway. So it took probably a good probably about a year after university until I got to a point where I felt well enough. So there was a period after that where I couldn't really do anything. And then
did you move back to Barrow in that time, or?
Yeah, I did for a bit. I tried to stay for a little bit, went into rented accommodation with a friend, and then realized very quickly that I would have to go and earn the keep to stay there. So went back home for a while, and then got a very lucky one. I just remember waking up one morning thinking, you need to go and apply for a job, because you need to do something, because this is not sustainable in this kind of way. And the way the illness worked, not to kind of bleat on about it because I'm here and I'm fine kind of thing, but it almost kind of went round in cycles. So you'd have periods where you got worse, and then it would kind of that would peak, if you will, in that trough, if that makes sense. And then you start to feel better again. You go, I'm coming out of this. I'm healing, and then you go back in again. So it was at one of these kind of up moments that I went, I'm going to go and get a job. I need to get a job. And I was quite lucky to find a graduate project management role at a company called APS Group in Stockport. And so I applied for that, came back to Manchester, luckily got that, and that was kind of the start of the next 10 years, to be honest, of getting the wings in projects and then eventually program management.
So how old were you when you started at APS Group?
2010 maths on the fingers. 22, 23. So it was,
good. And how what was that like then when you started? Obviously the illness, which just sounds horrific, by the way, like the mental
it wasn't nice,
mental sort of like anguish of it, because you don't have a name for it, and it must have been like you were kind of like just expecting when you're feeling all right, because you've been here before, to at some point going to go downhill again, and you're sort of like that mental sort of torture. But did that did that resurface when you started in, sort of working in your early career, or?
It did, but never. I was able to manage it a bit better. It never kind of sunk as low. I just want to pick up on that point where you said mental resilience, because I think that's a really good way. I think that's probably that's the thing that picked me up by the collar, shook me around a bit, and said, reassess what you're doing here. You've been a bit of an idiot, for want of a better word, and not the way I would advise it happening. I would much rather have had someone take me to one side and give me a stern talking to, or a bit worse, or whatever it may be, to make me see.
Yeah.
But you're right. There was, just thinking back, there was some really dark times there, because you don't know what you're going to do, and there was never kind of, I don't want to moan about it or look for sympathy at all, but there was never any kind of respite.
Yeah.
So there was I think, if I look back at what I was like before that and what I'm like now, I think if I was to kind of take myself out and analyze myself, I'd say I'm a lot more, my resilience is a lot higher.
Yeah.
So Melissa will often comment and say, like, that happened, and if that happened to me, I'd have done this and gone off its end, or if that happened to me, it was unfortunate, then I've been absolutely gutted. And there's a much more level-headedness to me now. I think there's the tolerance on either side of things is much greater, and to me, that's probably one of the best things that could have happened to me in that respect, because of what I'm doing now. But
because
no,
what you're saying there is, like, if I put myself in that in those shoes, you've not got a name for the disease that you've got. It's horrific in terms of, like, it's not just like a cut or a bruise, and it's making you feel so bad all the time, because it doesn't have a name. It doesn't have an end date. No one knows when it's going to come back, and when it's when it's finished, or whatever. Whereas if you have I suppose a proper diagnosis, you might say, oh look, you're going to be ill for maybe 2 years, but then after that the prognosis is actually okay, because most people tend to get a lot better, but you don't even have a name for what you've got. So you must have been in it thinking, don't know what's wrong with me, no idea when I'm going to be fully better, if I'm going to be fully better. So that must have played all kinds of like havoc with.
There's some dark times. There's some dark times, but as I say, it's now we're talking about it, because as I say, I'll take the lessons at the time, move on, and drop the rest. It's a much more freeing, easier way to live when you're trying to make hundreds of decisions a day, or whatever. You've got stuff to deal with going forward. There's no point kind of dwelling on the past. But I think there's probably a lot of things I need to thank that for in the end, that period of time. And as the other thing is that you mentioned is there was no kind of certified way or recommended way of managing any of that either. So I had these pills that you kind of stick under your top lip, and they would dissolve into bloodstream, and they're meant to stop you from I know it's not a nice topic to talk about, but to stop you from kind of being sick. So it was that kind of stuff. But outside of that, I remember there was a lot of kind of just walking and breathing. Sounds odd, but that was the kind of way you could go. And at least then, if you're outside and walking around, then if the worst happens, then you're not going to ruin anybody's sofa or carpet or whatnot. But there was I think there was a lot of resilience from that. And now we're talking about it, I think there's a lot of benefits to come from it in a way, if that makes sense.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, there's not many. Most people, I think, if they go through something that really adversely affects their health for such a long period of time, they at least know what they're dealing with. Whereas I suppose that uncertainty must have been very difficult, for sure. So
I should say on that point, though, that it didn't provide, a lot of people at this point, maybe I've watched too many movies, would say that was my moment of clarity, and it suddenly made me bring everything into focus. It didn't. I still had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to be sat at home feeling like this every day, and I needed to do something about it. And I'm not saying at all either that by going and getting a job that helped in the situation at all. I think I was just lucky with the circumstances that whatever it is was starting to kind of get to a more manageable level than it had been in the previous 3 years or so. But no, I managed to go back to the original point. I managed to kind of manage my way through in the first few years, and so that was fortunate from that point of view.
So it gave you a little push to obviously get out, to obviously start your career. So what was that like then in the early years?
Enjoyable, because you've got no expectations, you just got ambition, or I did at that point. So it was everything's new, isn't it? That's the kind of thing I miss these days in a way, is that once you've kind of, the more experience you've got, the less highs and lows you've got as well. So again, everything becomes muted in a way. So
Seen it
I
all
just
before in
remember,
some context and
yeah.
stuff. Yeah, yeah. I know what you mean.
I mean, I'm talking like I'm 20 years, 30 years old than I actually am, but I'm not. So I appreciate to stay in my own lane. But at that point, I just remember, I remember talking to one of my friends, well, Yanni actually, who we both
Yeah,
know. We were both working there at the time, and I remember us saying to each other, if we could just get to £30,000, that's life sorted.
yeah,
And that's me as we're driving to work in a Ford Focus with 250,000 miles on it, trying
yeah,
to navigate through. And it was just it was enjoyable because I like learning new things and developing things, which is weird because I shunned all of that side of things at school, and it's now something that gets me out of bed in the morning, is to try and
yeah.
be a little bit better at something I've not done before. But at that point there, doing it in a way that was also paying you for the service of doing it, and learning a lot from it, I I remember mostly just enjoying it, as I say, and a lack of expectation. Where if you did something basic, and because you were new and inexperienced, people were like, oh wow, that's really good. Like the bar was set
Yeah,
quite low at that point. There's no expectation, as I say. So yeah, it was good, and I picked up a lot of skills at that point as well.
good stuff. How long did you stay with that company for?
So I probably stayed there. I think I ended up staying there almost 5 years. So I probably would have gone a lot sooner. But um, about 2 years in, so the graduate course was 2 years, and at the end of it, you to come out as a fully fledged, if you like, project
Yeah,
manager. And I was quite fortunate that around that time, so around the time that I may have been looking and going, what's next for me? How do I progress my career? How do I get into? I knew I wanted a role that would give me accountabilities, and was, for want of a better term, important, maybe valued is a better
yeah,
term. But I still didn't know what it was. I just knew I liked variation, didn't like repetition. Um, but at that point, so as that was kind of maybe starting to bubble up in the back of my head, APS, who were traditionally a print manufacturer, so they had the print halls, they did they still do, I think, the point of sale for Co-op and Superdrug, etc.
right.
As I was joining, they were going into multi-channel marketing, so the technology side of things, print was declining, and stuff like the internet and digital marketing, both in store and online, was coming bigger.
Yeah,
So they were transitioning through, and then it just so happened. Maybe not the case, and maybe someone will tell me otherwise, but I don't think so Ford came through, Ford of Europe, car manufacturer, came through and somehow said, we want APS to refit all our major showrooms across Europe, of which there's like 2,600 something.
right.
And I'm not sure they appreciated at the time. I think they went to tender for some brochures, and I don't think they realized at the time what they were potentially getting themselves into. So I was the resource to manage that project at the time, which ended up turning into still probably the biggest piece of work I've ever run. And that was, I didn't realize at the time, but in retrospect, that was that was program management, and it was literally a blank piece of paper in terms of what APS did was quite literally putting ink on paper.
Yeah,
And what we were doing here was finding wood supplies and metal supplies. We were building semi-opaque acrylic walls and tables that look like the Genius bars at Apple,
yeah,
and speaking to Caligaris and getting like customer chairs and coffee areas, and like a proper full end-to-end design, deliver, install across Europe in all these different languages. And so I did that, and that was probably 18 months. And I worked really closely with the owner at APS, and got to see how I think it was his dad or his granddad that founded that APS company, and then handed it down, but got to see kind of how a founder-led business run, and a successful one at that.
yeah,
And what was great about it and what was not so great about it, and got a good exposure to a varying different levels of leaders, as I had done at General Electric as well, which I didn't really speak about, but because of the size of GE and the maturity of
yeah,
it, I got to see both there and APS. I got to be able to sit back and just watch what other people did.
yeah,
The people that I liked or admired, and the people that maybe still liked and admired but didn't agree with what they were doing. And it was a really good opportunity in a very corporate culture, and perhaps a less mature culture. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way at all, but just different companies, to see what people were doing, how they acted, because and what was motivating them.
yeah,
So I remember, particularly at General Electric, there was somebody in there that was, for want of a better term, playing the game.
right.
They were getting promoted time and again, and they'd been promoted, and I could see this, and I was the intern. they've been promoted beyond their competence, and now the politics were being played to get that person shunted and demotivated. But they were quite happy to stab people in the back on the way up. And so I think at that point, I could see some of that kind of, to a lesser extent, there was less politics at APS, but you could see what the good people were doing and what I was classing as good versus perhaps what the company was classing as good, because they don't see what I see on the ground. And so I was starting to get a really good picture of who I wanted to be from a professional point of view. And I think that's the starting point where I realized that this is not a zero-sum game. Like, for me to succeed, I need other people to succeed with me. And that's kind of, if anybody listening to this is going into project program management or change delivery or agile or anything like that, and they are responsible, accountable for change or transformation, I think one of the biggest lessons I could give you is this is not a zero-sum game, and you are by yourself are not going to be the one that makes a difference. You are there. Anybody can do the technical side. And I ran a mentoring scheme at one of the financial services companies I worked at. And the way I did this, I had two separate points. I had the kind of technical skills, so your plans, your raids, your communications, etc. And I basically said to them, I think, not just me, but I think anybody competent can get anybody at a novice level to a competent level on the technical side of change management in several months. You can do that. It doesn't take a genius. So that's a kind of given, and we'll work through how to run, maintain, manage, communicate, cascade those documents. The bit for me, and I maintain to this day, the bit that will make good people great and great people fantastic is the interpersonal side of things. Knowing the ways that different people react to different things, knowing how to influence, negotiate. Do you be quite assertive? Do you try and bridge? Are you more paternalistic, authoritarian? And there's no kind of one answer to that. The same person could benefit from different styles of management in different days, depending on different factors. And for me, that's the kind of fascinating thing, and that's what kept me in that kind of role as well. And that's what I've tried to show other people when I had the ability to, had the opportunity to try and mentor other people, is you can do the technical side of change management, but it's the people side. And I could see the ones that didn't get that and were willing to backstab or to play politics or to play games for their own benefit. It was, going back to the term we used earlier, it was a cul-de-sac, because they were basically building their own ceiling. They were going to get found out eventually, or they were just going to work at a terrible company with terrible people, and that to me would be a really unhappy way to work. So I was learning there quite quickly that actually empower other people, be consultative, make sure that if someone has done the work, you make sure that they get the gratification for it, and facilitate in that way. And understand what value you bring to the table, but make sure that you understand it's not a zero-sum game. Somebody doesn't have to lose for you to win. We can all
absolutely win. I mean, that resonates with me big time, and some of the things that I've seen in my career as well. And I think it's a leadership thing is what you're describing there. I think a lot of people think that to get somewhere in life or in a corporate environment, you have to be ruthless, and you have to stand on people when you have the opportunity, and you have to be sort of cutthroat and all of those things. It's actually the complete opposite. It's about shining a light on, as you've said, the people who do good things, and especially if when you do get into a position where you are in a sort of leadership position, is allowing your team to take the credit, whereas you take the flak when it's not going well. And I think in a leadership environment, when you see it in the corporate world, bad leaders do it the other way around. And
absolutely,
when you're young, and it's amazing that you saw that so early on in your career, because when you're young, depending on who you're surrounded by, I think a lot of the time you can get that mixed up really, really easily, and you think, that's how you behave to get far. And when actually, not even just in the corporate world, in the work world, just in life it just resonates through everything. But there's a definite craft in what you've just described, the communication aspect of it, the influence and everything. And a lot of it, I think, is counterintuitive as well. in terms of it's not necessarily black and white the way you think about those things, for instance, going back to leadership, when you take ownership of a problem, for example, you say, you hold your hands up and say, I've messed up here. You don't actually lose face the way you think you're going to lose face. You actually gain a lot of credibility by doing that sort of thing, especially with your team. You say, I've messed up here. I'm really sorry. These are the ways that I'm going to fix it. And this is the way that I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. It doesn't play out the way that you think that, in terms of in a corporate world, because I think you often think, oh, if I do stuff like that, I'll look stupid, or I'll look weak, or whatever. But actually, in the long run, it creates a little bit of a culture about the people around about you to actually say, well, if that's the stance that you've taken, that's what I'm going to take. And is all of a sudden you look around and people are taking ownership for stuff that wasn't even their responsibility, but you've created this little culture of people just getting stuff done and supporting each other. So,
and by doing that, things go wrong less often as well. So it's actually a self-perpetuating benefit anyway.
Yeah, but when you're younger, you don't. No one really sits you down and tells you that. I think ego is a massive thing in that, especially in a work environment, because you have those people who are ego, driven by their ego, and I just think that's the worst thing in a team environment, because people are in it for doing it for what they can get out of themselves. And the person you just described, in terms of climbing the corporate ladder, yeah, fair enough, they played the game, but
it wasn't sustainable.
And I bet you their reputation was completely soiled, for pretty much everybody. But yeah, it's amazing, those things. It fascinates me actually when you think about, when you join the dots of those little things, when you're coming up through your career, you don't often appreciate at the time those things when they're happening. There's no firework moment, no Eurikah moment. But you know what I mean? There's no sort of light bulb, and you think, well, actually, I totally get that. It's when you think about it years afterwards, and you kind of join the dots on a lot of things, I think that makes sense. So
I also think it's not an easy thing to do either. So I think the other thing I learned at that point as well was that I don't want to play the game. I'm a terrible salesman. I can't sell myself very well, but I know what I know. I know why I know it, and I've got the ability to be able to look at a situation and try and look at it from the side that I don't immediately go to.
Mm-hmm.
And try and understand that. And if I can understand that side, and I'm not the first person to say this, so this is not anything new or revelation, but if you can understand the side that your opponent, for want of a better terminology, is on, and you can understand that and still argue your own point,
mm-hmm.
then I think that puts you in a very, very strong position. And I think ultimately, where very simplistically, and things have to be very simple for them to work for me. So you've got to be able to kind of get to the lowest common denominator. Just do what's right. Forget the politics is stressful and it's difficult, and you end up spinning yarns and lies and it's not a nice way to be. And again, probably this is going back from the early days of how I was brought up, but just do the right thing, because nobody can ever ultimately sustainably outplay you if you just do the right thing. There are no politics stronger than doing the right
100% believe that. Doing the right thing is always the right thing, but that's a value thing that was instilled in you. That's not something that you I don't think that's anything that you can be taught. I think it's one of those things that you either get that or you don't.
I think you can see it. I think so. For me, and again, I'm probably doing a lot of people a disservice here, but I think what I kind of try and pride myself on doing is being able to have that kind of. I don't know if you've ever read Thinking Fast and Slow, but I've not read the full thing, but it's a great book. Which makes me sound
it's actually on my bookshelf, but I'm sorry to say that I haven't read it yet. I got it sent to me as a gift, and I've not got around to it yet.
if you're anything like me, so I've said this to a few people, and I either get nods of approval or I get mocking laughs, but I don't tend to read a full book because I don't need you to explain something to me in 100 different ways for me to get it. Essentially, once I've got that's
there it is.
Yeah.
Just as proof. Just as proof. I'm not spinning you a yarn there.
But so I'm terrible because I don't read the full things. Once I've got or very rarely do I read the full book. Once I've got the message, I move on to something else. And so the reason I bring the book up is I still have quite a strong type 1 brain. So I still have a very instinctive, very cynical side of things. That as I say, from a youngster, is if someone says to me, "You're going to do this," my instinct is to go, no.
Yeah.
But what I've managed to do over time, and I'm doing this now with the Eurikah side of things in terms of trying to rewire my brain and how I approach different things, is now I give this type 2 side of the brain. So that type 1 is and Daniel explains it much better than I can, but type 1 is kind of the emotive, instinctive side. Mm-hmm. And type 2 is the more analytical side of things that weighs up the pros and cons, digests things a bit more, and then comes to a conclusion rather than just a reaction.
Yeah.
And so I think I always kind of had a bit of a natural ability for the type 2. And I could see some of that feedback even at university, people saying stuff like you're quite mature for your age and whatnot, which is weird things to hear as you're kind of 18, 19, 20. But nowadays, I think that's even further. And it's, as I say, it's a real gift if you can, not a gift, but it's a real benefit, a tool in your arsenal if you can have that ability to kind of override the instinction to just go, no, that's wrong, whatever, Mm-hmm. I'm trying really hard not to swear, but yeah, not that kind of instinctive piece. Instead, just to go, well, hold on. I don't agree with that. Why don't I agree with it? Why has that person said that in that way? Why do they believe that? And what can I do to say, actually, am I wrong? Are they right? Or actually, can I understand why they've said that? And if we take it back to the professional work environment, if I'm speaking with a dev team and devs are saying to me, and it's a really bad example because I'm not technical at all, but if a dev team is saying to me, I want to build something in this way, and for some reason I might have a way of thinking, well, I think it should be done a different way. If I can go and understand why they're saying that and then be able to have a conversation and go, right, the reason I think option A is better is this reason. What's the reason you think B is better? Let's have a conversation and let's work it out. Mm-hmm. Influencing and negotiating is not always about getting your way. Sometimes it's just about getting to the right answer. Yeah. And so, as I say, that book, I would highly recommend it to anybody, even if you only read the first, I think I read the first 3 to 4 chapters, got the elements and said, right, I've got that now. I would recommend it to anybody.
Do you think you can rewire your brain?
100%, yeah, I have done.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. If I was speaking to you 10, 15 years ago, or maybe a bit, how old am I now? If I was speaking to you as a teenager, the type 2 side of my brain would be there, but it would be overrun by the type 1. So I would be far more emotional, irrational, instinctive. And we would then have to come out of that moment. There'd be far more flashpoints if it was in a working environment. I would be pushing people's buttons to get the reaction so I could escalate it further, right. So I could have that bigger reaction. And that's, if you speak to people these days, they're probably the kind of complete opposite now in a way. Right. There's still times outside where we just want to let everything slip and just let the type 1 take over again. But, and in professional ways as well. So the work we're doing at the moment in terms of, I was used to, as I say, traditional marketing, which was spend all your money up front doing something really big and really clever and creative. And actually, from this side of things, with the startup, I've kind of had to reject all of that side of things and take a much more scientific, data-driven approach. So we do Eurikah, we do venture design and customer development and lots of lean hypotheses. So actually, marketing is no longer about what can we do that's cool and creative that we can throw out there and people can see and think, oh, isn't that cool? It's more about saying, what's the problems we're trying to solve to people? Where are these people at? What are the messages that resonate? What are the problems? And then you build an experiment. And then that experiment is an output, and that becomes the kind of marketing. So both in a kind of just a day-to-day and in a professional sense, I absolutely, I think I have done that. So I'd have to say yes.
Very interesting. So it's a fascinating topic that it pickles my brain at the moment.
What would you say? Would you disagree or would you agree?
The reason why I'm so I'll try and keep this succinct, but the reason why I'm so fascinated with it is that one of my daughters, one of my twins, Darcy, has a condition called congenital alternating esotropia, which basically means it's an alternating squint. So she only ever looks at you with one eye. And then
Right.
depending on where you are in the room, how far you are away, she alternates, and she'll look at you like, and she'll squint in her left eye and look at you with her right eye, and then she'll do the opposite. So the good thing about that is that she uses both of her eyes, and one of them's not unused full time. But what more, and this is all stuff I've just learned over the last like couple of years, but it's actually not an eye condition, it's a brain condition.
Right.
And it's all to do with the without getting too biological. Again, it's all stuff I've just like studied as a parent in my own time, because I don't wear glasses and don't understand vision or sight or anything like that. But basically, when you look at something, your eye, if you look at something through your one eye the whole time, the brain sends what's called monocular neurons from the back of your eye to your brain, and it sees an image in not 3D, so it's two-dimensional, and that's what Darcy sees. She doesn't see depth; she just sees everything in 2 dimensions, and that the doctors have said that she'll never see in 3D, which was when they told me that, hit me like a train. Yeah. And even if you have surgery to align the eyes, I've been told that her brain will still behind the scenes shut off one of the eyes, and she'll only ever still see through one of the eyes, even though the 2 eyes are straight. Sure. And the reason why I'm fascinated about the whole rewiring of the brain is because there's a woman in the US who is who's got a PhD in neurobiology, I think it is, or something very similar. And she had this condition, and she done something called vision therapy, and she successfully rewired her brain to stop sending molecular neurons and start sending binocular neurons. Wow. And she experienced 3D vision for the first time in her like 30s, basically. Wow. And saw depth for the first time, saw trees going off into the distance and all that. And her argument, as someone who's highly educated and in the sort of brain and the way that it works, is that the neuroplasticity of the brain is much higher than we all actually realise. And if you think about it in terms of things like a violin player, for example, the ends of their fingers become, not from birth, but through learning, become more sensitive to playing the violin, for example. And her argument is, well, if people can do that in their adult life in that way, or in other ways, which there's a couple of other examples that I've forgotten about now, then people should be able to do that with things that are such second nature, such as your vision and your sight, essentially. So
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so that's the succinct reason why I was actually genuinely interested in that, because I really, 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 really hope that for Darcy's sake that you're correct, because I'd love for her to learn how to sort of rewire her brain so that she can actually sort of unlearn the things that she somehow has managed to learn and relearn it. So,
well, that example is a really hopeful point. If that person has been able to, I think not to trivialize my stuff, but mine might just be maturity and growing up and just forcing yourself to do, and it's nowhere near the same kind of. And I'm not a brain surgeon in any shape or form, but there's different parts, isn't there, that work in different ways that are activated by different things. So I don't think it's not a one size fits all, is it? I don't think it's a binary answer to the question. But in terms of, it looks like from your side, from what they're saying, that's possible. And I certainly think from my far less important way, I think
it's a fascinating topic, though. I mean, the whole the thought that, just the power of the human mind, and the fact that we don't actually know how powerful it is or how to harness it properly. And I think fast forward a couple of 100 years, and I think we'll get a much better idea of what we what we can actually,
I think you might be
what
right.
we can actually do
Yeah.
with it. But amazing. That topic, I could just, it just, you think about something, you think that is like, it just sends me some other dimension. You think that, there's so much possibility there for us in so many different ways. But
for anyone listening, it's the kind of, as I say, if you're not doing really specialist stuff, if you're not a vet, if you're not a brain surgeon, but if you're not a surgeon, if you're not doing something that requires a specialized skill and niche, if you're doing something far more generic, like, without wanting to offend, like we're doing, which is much more generic business kind of roles, then I can't overstate how important the interpersonal aspect is, which you don't get taught, or I certainly didn't get taught at university. And it was only through experience and asking people and observing and trying to kind of go, well, why did that not work? And why did that work? And do I agree with that? And why do I agree with that? Without kind of caring about what the social norm or what is just generally accepted as being the right thing to do. Kind of put that to one side. I think it helps you build a better version of what you want to be in a professional world. But also, as I say, you will be so much more valuable to whatever organization you work for if you can manage and work with and communicate to people of all stakeholder levels.
Definitely. And especially given where we are at in terms of, communication and the world being such a small place, and it's not like it's 1950s where we all sat behind a cubicle and you go in with your lunchbox and you say hi to the person next to you and do your work and then go home. It's just not, very few workplaces are like that now. Such an important thing. So going back to your sort of journey then. So the next part, you sort of moved away from like permanent work at some stage,
well, so there's a bit in the middle. So essentially we finished the main Ford program at APS, and at that point it was very clear that, given the fact that that was by far the biggest thing APS as a company had ever done, we'd built a brand new, essentially built a business from scratch. As I say, they didn't do any of that. There was no capabilities really for what we were doing there. So all of us, it was really rewarding in the end, because a lot of us put a lot of effort, a lot of hard work, and it was a really good team at that point to work with. But from a personal point of view, I looked around and went, I'm not going to be able to do anything like this here ever again, because it was so unique to the situation. So I ended up going into financial services, which was a big kind of industry change. But as we said from the very beginning, there's always been with me a little bit of a fascination around not money from a material point of view, but the role that money can play in opportunity. So going into financial services, not only does it, as a generalization, pay quite well, but just getting to see the inner workings of the industry, working for a financial services company, which includes credit, includes banking, etc. And then just to kind of not be a consumer, but be part of that kind of the other side of the fence. If you like to see the nuts and bolts of how it works and pick that up, that was a really great experience. And that was a really huge piece of work. So it was to go in and, as part of a transformation program, to build a kind of modular banking system and migrate from old infrastructure to new infrastructure. So again, was there for a few years and got a lot out of that. And it was at this point that I kind of started to get into investing. I'd been meaning to get into it for probably 10 years beforehand, but I couldn't find a way in, and I couldn't find anything that gave me the information I needed to commit. So I'd opened a fake money account which tracked the stock market, and you could pretend to invest in things and then track how they performed. But I had no clue what I was doing. And by the time I got to kind of late 20s, I decided to go contracting because I could take much more control over my finances. Yes, you earn more as a business, but I think when people hear contractors, they think the day rate is what you take home. It's not. So there was, but you do have more freedom about how you can use your money. So that was really appealing to me. Program, project change, transformation, etc. is a perfect kind of contracting freelance role, because you're there for a finite period of time. You add your value, you move on. So that was perfect. But also the big thing, I'd say, because you could control your money more, I'd got to the point now where I'd kind of spent a period of time where I'd said, right, you're earning enough money now to be able to kind of do something with it. You want to be able to have the freedom of being financially independent. You've now got no excuse, because you have the resources available to you to do it. So I spent a lot of time trying to be patient, which is not my strongest seat, but making sure that I didn't do anything until I had a strategy that I knew I was fully confident on. And so I had that, I got that, and then I started investing, and going contracting again helped me to essentially be able to invest more money than I would be able to as a permanent. And for all the other reasons from a professional point of view, it was great to do. And it was at that point, at the very beginning of that, where essentially I looked around in the industry and said, this is what I'm going to do. Who's doing this? And the answer was that nobody was even close to doing this. And I was going, this is crazy, because like I was saying earlier, that ability now to critically analyze something else, try and work out why it is that they're doing something in that way, and then be able to go, I can do better than that, or I've got a different way which I think is superior, because having not just gone, that's crap and I can do better, but going, right, why are they doing things in this way? And that was kind of the very, very, very beginnings of Eurikah, essentially. Right. And it's taken a couple of years. And at this moment in time, as I say, we are speaking with funding, but it's been completely bootstrapped to get to this point. But it is essentially based on the investment side of things that I started doing and still do to this day, and will continue to do into the future.
So when did that moment happen where you sort of like thought there's something in this here, and you had that sort of
don't say it
light bulb moment? I was just about to say it.
I could see it coming. The honest answer to that is there wasn't one Eureka moment.
Yeah.
It's been a gradual process, and there was multiple moments where the feedback I was getting. So for the first 6 to 9 to 12 months of this last 3 years was literally me just talking to anybody in my circle that would give me the time of day to listen to me, in order to try and break this proposition down. And the reoccurring response I kept getting was, I can't believe this doesn't exist already. Yeah. And so what I've always tried to do, as I say, because I'm driven by just doing the right thing in the right way. I don't care about legacy. I don't care about what anyone else says. I don't care about, and this might go right back to the very beginning, but I don't care about making someone proud. I don't really identify. A lot of people's stories will be, I did this because I wanted to make my dad proud, or my mum proud, or my family member proud. And it's not the fact that I don't want to do that, but I just find that, as we said earlier, kind of a very restrictive way to operate. Like, do what you want to do, and as long as you're guided by your own desire to do the right thing in the right way, again, not being a zero-sum game, then the rest should kind of fall into place. So yeah, there wasn't really a single moment. It was just a gradual, kind of iterative approach to putting this out there to try and get it broken. And every time it got thrown back at me and was validated, I was going, there's something here. I can start to upskill myself and start to get into this kind of startup world, because I've come from a non-startup world, and the way you build and operate, in my opinion, in this world is very, very different to what you do in a mature industry. However, with agile ways of working, methodologies, that mindset is starting to shift in the more mature world to become more startup focused, leaner, more data driven, more experiment hypothesis driven, as opposed to kind of whimsical, authoritarian 1980s power suit dupe wearing kind of, I make the decisions. That doesn't work, and it never really works. There's just you can get an advantage over other people. So it's been a long process, but I've learned so much because I've worn so many hats during this. But again, just going back to the question, I think the answer to that is the first point was coming out of all that research and looking at all the other ways of investing, of doing various different things. And I don't like that because I'm looking at that won't work for me, because then having like process of elimination, having this one thing that feels really strong, and then just consistently throwing it out there to try and be broken, and it not being broken, and it was, like, as I say, just kind of grew from there.
What made you arrive at the name?
Partly because of, as I say, I'll explain it. I'll try and do it very briefly as well. I'm terrible at trying to explain what we do from an investment point of view in a short way, because I can simplify it, but investing it underneath, customer facing, it's always been very complex, because that's how, call me cynical, but that's how a lot of people make the money. They create barriers, artificial barriers, and then they stop you getting in, and they monetize it. But underneath what we've done, there's a lot of work to make this very simple. To firstly answer the question, it was the response I kept getting from people that once you realize what we're doing and how we're doing it and the benefits, it's kind of like, how have I not been doing this all the time? So essentially what Eurikah is and apologies for people here who've seen all this before, but essentially, if you invest today, generally speaking, you've got three primary ways of doing it. Option one, you go to an independent financial advisor. They have very high fees and very high capital requirements. And by that, even in Manchester, we're not even talking London here, you can, if you have less than, say, 100,000, 250,000, a lot of IFAs will go, I'm sorry, I can't make enough money off you to make this worth my while. And the fees historically for that more personal bespoke service are much higher. And without going into loads of information, because this could be a massive tangent, which I won't subject you to, but those fees from a compounding point of view are really, really damaging to the client whilst they're making the advisor very wealthy. So then with the rise of the internet, and that was kind of the way you did it to begin with, it was a lot of stuff was done over the phone. You see the people on the stock floors and stuff in the 80s and stuff. Internet comes along, and then you've got this DIY ability. So now software is allowing an individual to pick up a phone and place orders on the markets from their device. Pure DIY. So the price comes down, but all the risk and all the barriers to entry that I suffered with for 10 years of what's my strategy and why am I doing this and how do I do it and what works and what doesn't work and all the different things and just what the hell is all this stuff and how do I make sense of it all? You're on your own in that middle. And then the third option, which is probably what Eurikah's closest to, but not the same, and I'll explain why as quickly as possible in a second, is what they call robo-advisors. And I'm not a big fan of the term because I think it undersells what we do anyway. But what a robo-advisor tries to do is take elements of both of these. So it gives you some recommendations based on some information you provide, which is not as sophisticated as an IFA or as bespoke as an IFA. It's more standardized. But it then also, because it's more standardized, it tries to give you all the convenience of a mobile device and the DIY side of things. So you still manage it. You don't phone up an IFA and say, buy me 100 shares of Tesla, please, today, now. And thank you. You still then are responsible for putting the money in and managing that account, but you've got the recommendation up front. And so if I can distill it down in the simplest way, the entire industry at the moment, from a robo-advice point of view, asks you about your risk tolerance. Are you cautious? Are you adventurous? Are you a 1, a 5? And again, if it was me a few years ago, I'd have looked at that and gone, what do you mean risk tolerance? What does risk even mean? And we've done this. We've gone out and asked a load of people, what does it risk mean to you? You ask 10 people, you get 10 different answers. Just to make it even more disingenuous and complex, to actually answer truthfully about the risk of investing, you need to have intrinsic knowledge of investing. So there's counterparty risk, there's currency risk, there's market risk. I mean, not things that a retail investor generally tends to think about or know about or is ever exposed to. So for me, on a personal level, asking someone about their risk tolerance who's a retail investor is a really disingenuous, bad way to onboard or allocate somebody into a set of investments. So we don't do that. We've got our own unique way of building a portfolio for you. And instead of it being cautious, balanced, adventurous, and maybe a couple of hybrids in between, what we've actually done is said, well, what's the most important thing that people should be thinking about when they invest? And that's time. How long do you want to invest for? And so we've created our own asset allocation model, which essentially is based around time. So when you come on, you don't get asked about cautious or adventurous, because what tends to happen on that side of things is that people, or the portfolios that are built in that way, are designed for the psychological aspects of risk for me. So if you say cautious, I'm going to build something that doesn't go down too much so you don't get scared, which is just a nonsense, illogical way in my brain to give somebody some investments. If you then said, actually, and we've done this case study before. So you go onto anyone in the industry and they say, what's your risk tolerance? And you say cautious. Come back to that one in a second. And then you come to Eurikah and do exactly the same thing, but now you're asked how long. And you think about it and you go, well, I want this for my retirement in 20 years. And we go, right, well, we have a 20-year portfolio, which is slightly different from the 19 years, slightly different from the 21, but we do everything on a time basis. And we did this with someone in the industry, like for like, exactly the same amount of money, so £1,000 up front and nothing more. If you go down the industry route, the average expected outcome after 20 years of your £1,000 in a cautious portfolio, £1,478. When you come down our route and said it's 20 years, and we've said, well, we're going to help you manage the psychological aspects of risk. We're going to try and get you the best outcome in the shortest amount of time. The 20 years, £1,000 on average gets you over £7,000. So it's a 7x difference just by asking time. So that's the first big thing that we do differently. And kind of you go, actually, why? Yeah, time's far better thing to ask them.
Makes sense, yeah.
The second thing we do is we don't charge percentage-based fees. So again, everybody in the industry, whether you're an IFA or a robo-advisor, every single model in the market that you'll see at the moment, you'll see a percentage base, and they take that based on your portfolio value. So think of your portfolio, your investments like a pie. Every month, someone's taking a little slice out of it. And it looks like quite a small number because on the robo-advisor side of things, it's maybe 0.6, 0.7, under 1% generally. And in the IFA world, it might be between 1 and 2%, depending on the scenario. It sounds really small, but somebody's constantly going into your portfolio and taking a small slice out and putting it in their pocket. And over time, what that does is say, just to stay even, my investments have always got to perform to a certain level. And when they don't, you get the negative side of compounding. So then because you're always taking a little slice of my pie, when the markets do go down, I've got less in my pie to help me recover again. So it has this horrible compounding effect. So what we've done there is gone, that's nonsense. It's not the right way to do things. So what we do is charge a flat £5 a month for everybody, regardless of the portfolio size. And by doing that, the amount of money we can save in fees. So we've got a case study over 40 years. We looked at the average pension. So 1.85% average pension fee. Let's just take that as a hypothetical. The average salary is about £31,000 and the average employee match pension is about £314.50 a month. In those two scenarios, exactly the same investment, exactly the same performance. The difference between the 1.85% fee and the £5 a month is £155,000 over the lifetime of that investment.
Crazy.
So what we've got, and as I say, when I told you I'd fail at doing this in a really short way.
It's not a simple thing to explain. That's the thing.
But it should. The simple way to explain it is what we've got is an investment service which makes more sense when you're on board, get you a better outcome more often because we ask about time, so you get a better allocation to your circumstances than a risk question. So we get better performance. We compound that better performance with lower fees, so more of your money stays working for you. So that compounds over time, generally in a positive way, better for you. And put it together, we save time and we save money. So you get to whatever your outcome is in the shortest amount of time. And there's some really powerful stats when we look at the comparisons. You know, we can help you retire on average 13 years earlier. We can help you save for a house deposit 2 years sooner. We can save you, and see if this one makes sense. We can save you £85,000 on average on a £40,000 student debt by saving for your kids' education up front, rather than having them pay interest by taking out student loans. So there's some really, really powerful things we can do, and we're demonstratably better and cheaper. So for me, it's this really powerful proposition. And when you say to people, it's about time, not about risk. It's about flat fees rather than percentage fees, and put together, you get better things with less money, more often, quicker. That's when people go, I mean, where's this been, kind of thing. So
it's amazing. Well, but the whole system though is being constructed in a way that makes it easy for companies who don't do that to make a shed load of money from people who don't understand the system. And some of the other platforms or apps that do similar things are geared up in that way, because I'm a customer of one of them, and that makes complete sense to me, because you do look at it like that as a non-sophisticated investor, and someone who's just sort of like very basic in the knowledge of investments in general. You look at that little percentage and you think that's all right. What's that? You know, you think, it's good, it's fine. But when you actually understand it in more context, the way you just describe it, that compounding scenario is a nightmare. Because when things don't go your way, you're
hard to recover.
Shooting yourself in the foot big time. So
we did another case study where we just looked at the power of our fee structure versus percentage-based fees, and we looked at exactly the same scenario again in time and contribution, and a 1% fee versus ours, and over say a 20-year time period, you were 20% worse off because you kept paying fees every year, so there was less money to compound for you. So again, it's not just the low fee and the flat fee, but it's keeping it separate as well from your investments, keeping it really low so you can almost forget about it.
Yeah.
£5 a month, hopefully, for most people. But also, as I say, it doesn't need to come out of your investments. You can pay that separate and keep all of your investments working just for you, not lining our pockets or anybody else's. And it goes back to kind of everything we've spoke about is embodied from my own personal professional outlook and what's got me through to where I was contracting and doing really well, both from a financial point of view, but also from the work I was doing and the value I was adding.
Yeah.
Everything that we've talked about tonight is embodied now in Eurikah. Is doing the right thing in the right way will get you long-term sustainable success.
Yeah.
So to plug another book, if anybody hasn't read already,
I hope I've got this one in my bookshelf as well.
there's a great, I've got it behind me, I think. There's a great book called Good to Great by John Collins.
Good to Great. I love that book. I'm not just saying that. There's a theory behind that. Sorry, there's a couple of theories in that book that I really love. One is called the flywheel effect.
Right.
You know, the one where you sort of all about building momentum and how it's really, you know, when you start a company, essentially it's so hard. Yeah, there's the flywheel effect, which is all about building momentum. And it really resonated with me when I started DigiTalent, because it was all about how it's so hard to get that initial momentum because the flywheel's so heavy.
Yes.
And once it's actually going, it's a lot easier. It's not just, you still have to give it obviously a load of push, but nowhere near what it was at the start. And the other concept was the hedgehog concept, which is all about
shows I've not read this for a while.
I hope I've got the right book here. Which is all around being a specialist in an area. Does that make sense? Is that in that book? Have I got the right book here? You
have the hedgehog concept.
Hedgehog concept. Yeah. There you go.
And the flywheel and doom loop. Yeah.
Those were the two things that stood out. What was it that stood out for you in that book?
The big one for me, and I say to anybody who I'm having this conversation with, is just go and read chapter 1 or 2, level 5 leadership. And there's not many things that will do that, because as I say, I try and kind of take a step back and mull things over and really challenge things until I've got an opinion that I'm comfortable and confident with. And it might still be wrong, but I still like to go through that process first and just have that kind of internal battle with the type 1 side of my brain. In this was a revelation when I read it, that level 5 leader. So basically, for anybody who's not going to read it, and spoiler alert, I guess, is the whole
any of these amateurs who haven't got it on their bookshelf like we do.
The whole premise around this is that Jim Collins got a team of essentially scientist analysts to go and find companies that were just doing as well as the average market in their industry, and then for no apparent reason outperformed multiple times everybody else in the competition for a period, to see what if they had anything in common that they could glean as good practice. And like you said, the flywheel and hedgehog concept are all things that they found elements in common with these companies. Level 5 leadership is literally what we've just been speaking about. It's what they found was the best leaders, and this is completely against where we're going today with this current generation of CEOs and entrepreneurs. But the best leaders they found for businesses are ones that don't do interviews, don't have a huge amount of charisma, don't care about fame or infamy, don't care about money, material things. They have I think that, to quote the book, a laser-like focus on what they want to achieve, where they can add value, what makes them different or better, how they can solve a problem in a new, more convenient way, essentially where they can add value beyond the rest of the industry. And I think that he paints a picture of quite a dour, boring, uncharismatic person, but it's that kind of that focus on something that says, I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing it. We don't necessarily know how we're going to do it, but we're going to find a way. We know what the end point is. We just don't know what the path is. And that for me was a kind of, it resonated really strongly with me, because it kind of reinforced everything that I'd kind of started to build myself. So to see that was a real validation of what the greats, not the goods, do.
Yeah.
I would recommend anyone to read that. And I think if you are having trouble or in that process of rewiring your brain or just trying to understand the playing field, that's a chapter that I've read a few times, and I will certainly go back to and read again in the future.
Yeah, it's an amazing book. I remember reading it quite maybe about 3 or 4 years into my career, and there was a few things that just stood out to me. And yeah, I funnily enough think about that. I think about that particular book quite often, and especially I think I went back and read it when I first started Digitalent, and just to remind myself, there's a few other things in there that are coming back to me now, like having the right people on the bus. He always talks about you need to have
on the bus.
You need to have the right people on the bus and stuff. And
they don't need to be in the right seats; they just need to be on the bus.
Just need to be on the
bus. You can figure out which seats later.
Yeah, it's so true though. I mean, it's such wisdom when you start your own, business as well. It just rings true in so many different ways. So
absolutely,
awesome. So talk to. Oh, you gave us a really really good.
Sorry.
No, it was great because, like I said, that's not it's not an easy thing to try and sort of like succinctly articulate. So talk to us a little bit about where things are up to now for you in terms of, like, obviously the journey of the company, because it sounded like the idea happened a while ago, like several years ago, but how, when was the moment that you started the company, and what's been the journey of, like,
sure,
when you started to where you are now?
Yeah, so to give you an idea, the company itself, the entity, was founded in Companies House August 22nd, 2019. We launched Invest, so the service is called Invest. The company is called Eurikah. We launched that at the end of January this year.
Right.
So what I'd done in between that essentially is wear all the hats of the business.
Yeah.
So I started to work out how to get to market with this whilst I was still contracting.
Yeah.
So I'd take some days off when I was looking at partners down in London. I'd go down to London and, not pitch them sort of, but trying to work out, do I have to build all this myself? Can I white label it so I can harness someone else's technology and build my bespoke piece onto there and get through?
Yeah.
And launch that way. How do I get this to market? What is how does it work? What are the economics? Is it even feasible? Unfortunately, we've found a way without having to get investment this far for me just to keep putting my hand in my pocket and get it off the ground. So we are live. We have a number of customers, which is great and growing, which is really positive. And I think some of the feedback we're getting just from when they hear us talking about it. So I did a podcast with a guy called Pete Komalafe, who's got I'll pitch his channel called Conversation of Money.
Yeah.
He's on YouTube. He's on Instagram. He's ex financial services, etc. So he's been around the block and he knows what he's talking about. He's got the qualification.
Yeah.
And we did a conversation just purely on Eurikah on his podcast, and the feedback was really, really humbling to hear the things that we thought people would be saying. I've never invested before. I've listened to what you've said about this. It makes sense to me. I'm signing up tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or I'm here. I've signed up. Can you just answer me a couple of really what we might think are quite basic questions about getting started?
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing what we've set out to do. We have what I find quite a frustrating proposition at times, is because we're trying to find a niche, but we appeal to everybody. It doesn't matter where you are from kind of where you're at in the world, in life, in terms of salary, or where you are. We can help anybody because we're cheaper than anybody else, and we think we've got something that, well, history shows, even though it's not a guaranteed future performance, we've got something that comparably is, in my opinion, better.
Mm-hmm.
So I think to answer the question, a lot of it was around trying to figure out what the operating model was going to be and how we took this IP that I created in terms of these portfolios, how we then sold that as a service. Yeah. And so that was quite a bit of time working that out, some failures about trying to get to market and then that falling over, and then getting to where we've got to today. So we're a regulated business, so we've had to go and find a partner to help us with the regulation whilst we become directly authorised so we can get to market quicker. Mm-hmm. But we are fully regulated by the FCA. We've got a trading platform which, like ourselves, are relatively new to the market, 3 to 5 years in. So they help us with all the client monies and the custodian of your assets, etc. So that's all, and they're part of Octopus, who are a huge, not conglomerate's probably not the right word, but they were founded in 2000. They have a renewable energy section, they have a venture capital section, they have a number of different arms of the business. So we've kind of got a partner in that sense whose roots are in our kind of startup founder roots. And then where we're at now is, as I say, so we're live. You can go on the website, Eurikah, spelled Eurikah, because I wanted trademarks, and Eureka in its normal spelling was obviously already trademarked. So we had to go with a slightly different spelling, but hopefully in time, as the brand matures, that becomes a more memorable way of doing things. And so, you can go on the website now. You can have a look at what we're doing. You can check out some of the social channels that we're on to see a bit more about that. But you can sign up today. You can use our what we call Tomorrow Builder. So we only ask 3 questions on sign up. It's how long do you want to invest for? What monthly contribution, if any? What lump sum, if any? And what I think we do quite uniquely is right up front, before you're obliged to do anything with any information, give us any details whatsoever. You can go on the website. You can play around with that. And what I think is really unique about that is not just the fact that it's our portfolios and our potential performance underpinning that, but the fact that you can sit there and see the difference of an extra couple of years, or an extra £50 a month, or the impact of a less couple of years, or less £50 or whatever it may be. And what you can start to do, which I think is unique for us, is the industry is very, very good at getting you started. They've made onboarding and depositing and the barriers to getting some money invested really, really slick and easy. What I think the industry doesn't do anywhere near as well, and maybe call me cynical, I think it's in their interest to kind of not do this as well, is they don't signpost the end very well, and they don't help you through the journey very well. In all 3 of those areas we talked about up front, what we're trying to do is actually, we think, not only do you get a better outcome, but from a business point of view, if you support your customers through their journey to whether they're doing this for a year or for several decades, if you're going to support them through that journey, then that's a better outcome. And you're probably going to get a better return on the customer lifetime value, because they're not going to be they're not going to drop out. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship. So what we do, I think, better than anybody else is not just we say, here it's really easy to start. Now, what's the outcome you want? So we don't think investing is a problem to solve. Investing is great. And as I say, the way we've built our portfolios, you can look at them and you can see how well they perform. You can see why we picked the kind of asset classes we picked, etc. And I should say, our portfolios are all based on a century's worth of data. So we do a lot of data analysis to then work out where your money is most likely to perform optimally over a given time period. So we don't necessarily say, look how great this ISA is, or look how great this investment is, because we think most people don't really care about investing. What you care about is achieving an outcome. I'm not telling you care about that. I'm just saying our belief as a general point of view is, what do more people care about? Buying a house, retiring early, saving for the kids, getting financial stability, traveling the world, or look how great and cheap my ISA is.
It's a means. It's a means to an end. In terms.
Exactly. So. A lot of what we do is tied to the different outcomes you can get from what we think is investing. Is still 9 out of 10 people in the UK are not doing it. You've got 36.5 million, I think it is, cash savings accounts, and around 2 to 3 million from the last set of data we've got of actual stocks and shares ISAs. So the vast majority of people are getting no return. They're actually, and this is a conversation all by itself, you're actually losing money for the last decade and a bit in cash, because the rate of interest in cash savings is lower than inflation. So your spending power is actually going down. And investing is one of the most, in my opinion, the best way to make your money work harder to get inflation beating returns, so you can achieve more with less. But I guess the point I was making is we talk about the outcomes that you can get, and we show you the benefit of, as I say, 2 years sooner with a house deposit, 13 plus years sooner to retire early in the same circumstances. And then what we also do is then show you, if it was like for like, so rather than the 2 years earlier, what do you get with us on average if you stay in the same amount of time? So in the house deposit scenario, it's like £16,000 more. And then when you think about it, you go, well, is that an extra bedroom? Is it a driveway? Is it a better location for the kids with schools, etc.? There's a lot of stuff you can do. And as I say, I've gone on a massive tangent, as I warned I would do. But what we're doing in that process is we're whether you realize it or not, we're giving you the ability to create an emotional desire with what the outcome is, and for you to work out without any obligation whatsoever what is the right circumstances for you around time and money And we can make sure, regardless of whether you are time rich, time poor, cash rich, cash poor, we can make a circumstance in that work for you to achieve that outcome. And not just achieve it, but achieve it quicker and cheaper than we think anybody else. So seeing that path as well, and then wrapping around all that, the ecosystem around educating you on the concepts of investing. So not making you an investor, but giving you the information so you understand if you were to log in one morning and see the markets have crashed, which statistically they do every 9 years or so. And we are overdue one at the moment, not to cause anyone a scare, because we're in a whole new territory with the fact we've been printing money since 2008. However, we want to give you that. We want to make sure you get the right thing, the right outcome. So giving you that information and wrapping that around as well, you're much less likely to then sell out at a loss, because a loss is only real if you sell, if you understand what normal is. And so all that put together, I think we've got something. I just think we've got something really compelling, and just it's going to get more people better outcomes than they would get anywhere else. And so, yeah, as you can tell, as I say, from being that kind of rebellious kid that was telling everyone to do one and would rather do anything else but actually focus on something. Nowadays, I mean, I don't think I've ever put anything anywhere near as much effort and focus and sacrifice and into something like this, because it works, and it's going to help.
You can tell just the way you talk about it, Chris. You come alive when you speak about it. It's really, really evident, and I think it's super cool to see anyone in their profession just like get it as much as you seem to do in yours. So like, fair play to you. That's awesome. Really awesome. What's the plans for the company then moving forward then? So obviously it's UK only at the moment. Is that it's UK. Sorry, it's UK only at the moment. We'll be applying imminently for our own FCA authorization, which will allow us to bring that in house, and we can take on that liability and perhaps do a little bit more than we can currently do. Because if you think about our current arrangement, it's like having a guarantor on a house deposit. So they take our liability, and for that we have to work to their rules, which is not a criticism, but it is a constraint, and we're aware of that constraint. The goal in the future, as I say, is that the beauty of this, and what like you say is so exciting and gets me so passionate about this, is that we can help so many people anywhere. Like, wanting to own a house is not, yes, it's a more common goal in the UK than perhaps some parts of Europe and the rest of the world. But owning a property, retiring early, being financially independent, creating a better future for your kids, creating more opportunities for yourself, peace of mind, well-being of having a financial backbone. These are not UK only aspirations. So the desire ultimately is to go where we think we can add most value. So again, very early days, and this is not all planned out yet, but we'd love to go to places like India and Brazil next, places where, and this is probably another conversation in its own right. One of the things I believe is that capitalism works, but it's just at the moment not being used properly. The world for me runs on fear and greed, and both of those things cause suboptimal outcomes. And if you can sit in the middle of that seesaw and not be tempted by greed and not be scared by fear, and just look at what the truth and the right thing to do is, then I think great things come from that. That's probably from books like this that have given us that. So if you look at what you can do with capitalism, it works. We are the average family today has a higher standard of living in capitalist countries than the richest top echelon did 100 years ago. And that's because we incentivize progression and we create more widgets per capita. And yes, I completely agree that the way the US and other countries, and even the UK, is harnessing capitalism is unfair. Trickle-down economics doesn't work, and it's not equal. So companies like ours, I think, are really important to come along to just try and shift that need on the balance back into the center, because we can all benefit from it these days. The barriers to entry have gone. So I think the next thing for us is A, expand beyond the UK. And then B, we've got some really, really cool things in the pipeline that are not just investing, which are going to add huge amounts of value and are unique in the market. And I appreciate that's a teasing thing and people probably rolling their eyes. But once we've got a bit further down the line and we can talk about that a bit more, I can't wait to go into some of the stuff we're going to do next, because it won't just be an investment platform. There'll be so much more value we can give you
once you've started to build some wealth and you've got some assets behind you.
Follow-up episode and Humans Attack coming. It's in the pipeline. It's in the pipeline. So
be an interesting one because it'll either be from the side of a curb somewhere, or with a big smile on my face because we've got some success. So yeah, there's probably no in between on this.
Awesome. Well, I think that's quite a good way to wrap things up. Yeah.
I've just got one more point that keeps coming to me, if you don't mind. I think just the very last one is the thing I would say to people as well is, and something I always used to think until I got some more experience. The average competence of the people that are working above you is not as high as you think it is. There are some very special, very talented people in this world, don't get me wrong, but do not overestimate and put people on a pedestal that are your superiors as you're developing. I think my learning from this, as we touched upon earlier, is that we're all far closer to the average than we are to the excellent. And so I think, I would that's really helped me personally when I've, when it's easier to just go with what your boss says rather than try and do the right thing. That, and to end on a really morbid note, but the other thing that's been really freeing for me is to just think, I'm going to be dead soon.
I think about that every day. I swear, I honestly do. I think about it. I have done for a very, very long time. I always think that. I don't say it to anyone, but always, always think. No, I always think it. Though, because it's such.
But I think it's really, really important to just to clarify that for me is a positive thing. It's not a.
It's inspiring.
It's not
I think it's an inspiring thing. It's like we're here for a very short period of time. Let's go. That's that.
Yeah, I find it quite freeing when things are not going well, or when I'm quite stressed, or when I'm worried about things. I think it's very easy just to go, do you know what? To me, because I don't care about legacy and whatnot, I just care about wanting to do the right thing in the right way. When I'm not here, so what? I've got no comeback. I've got nothing. It doesn't matter ultimately to me.
Yeah.
Therefore, just give your all to do the right thing and stick by that, and you'll get to where you need to get to. And for me personally, anyway, as I say, it's not a negative. To me, it's a kind of. I personally wouldn't call it inspiration. I call it more freeing. It takes some shackles off when you put some expectations on yourself, just to go, do you know what? Yes, things are important, but it ultimately, if you think about it in a way, for me anyway, that says long term, it doesn't matter. I found that a really kind of just a really freeing way to think about things.
Definitely, it recalibrates my thoughts as well, because it's like, especially when I was a bit younger, I'd think about things like I would get maybe a bit angry or upset about things that were out with my control, and most of it's to do with like your own expectation management. The world doesn't conform to the way you thought it should at that moment, and you get really upset about it and stuff. And that's one way that I had when set many years ago now, of reminding myself that none of it matters, because at the end of the day, we're not here for a very long time. And the only two things that I tell myself that I can control are my actions and my attitude, and everything outside of that, it's gone with the wind type thing. So
absolutely.
But no,
I hope that's come across in the right way, because it can be misinterpreted. I think I'll stop trying to explain myself, but I think it doesn't take away the pride of wanting to do the right thing, and it doesn't trivialize things that are important to you on a day-to-day basis. It's more just the fact that says, don't constrain yourself by thinking you've got to live up to some kind of expectation, or that all these people are special and you've got to find the magic ingredient or the secret sauce to get to that point. These people are not as high as you think they are, and these things don't ultimately matter as much as you think they do. Or that's that's probably the advice I give to myself.
I mean, it's perception. I think at the end of the day, when you're early on in your career, you look at job titles, you look at seniority, and you maybe. I mean, I used to do it. I don't do it now, but I used to do it back then. You maybe wouldn't talk to someone because they were like the big boss, or like you'd feel maybe inferior or whatever. And when you think about it, when you're a lot older, it's like that person was in your shoes at some point, and take them away from a work environment. They're a human being, and you know, like you said, they're not as special as you sort of think of them as, and I'm sure that most of the good ones anyway wouldn't want to be thought of like that anyway.
Exactly.
They want to be thought of as a, you know, as a normal person. So I completely understand where you're coming from with that. It's a very good and valid, you know, valid point. So awesome. Well, yeah, well, I think we'll wrap it up there. I really
Perfect.
enjoyed the conversation, Chris. It's been very interesting to hear your story, and I really thanks so much for coming on and sharing it with us.
Appreciate the ability to, or just the allowance to go off on a tangent and just
I've
just talk
enjoyed
along.
it.
But no, thank you for the opportunity. It's been really
I've
interesting to talk
enjoyed
with you
it
as well.
a lot, and watch out for the follow up episode on humans of tech at some point in the future.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Chris.